We have a really great presentation coming up, and this is the start of our athlete performance theme for today. The presentation is called Born to Run, Forecasting the Risk of Injury Through Genetics, and it is done by a brilliant man who I'm very proud to have here today, and I've hyped him up a lot, but he's going to deliver, I know he is. Please welcome to the stage Stuart Kim, CEO of AxGen. Stuart. Thank you very much, Stuart. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dan. And I'd like to thank Joe Lemire and the rest of SportTechie for giving me this opportunity. I'm really happy to be able to present here today for you. Major injury, like an ACL rupture, can take a long time. It takes a year to recover. Maybe you never ever fully recover from an ACL injury. And for serious athletes, there are no minor injuries, because if a minor injury happens during the Olympics, you're out of the Olympics, and that's a complete disaster. And if you own a team, you could pay a lot of money to your athletes that are sitting on the bench. And so literally billions of dollars are spent every year to pay athletes to recover while they're in the training room. This is where we currently are. You don't know what your risk for injuries is from your DNA standpoint. You couldn't tell me, unless you're one of our customers, whether you're at risk for knee injuries or shoulder injuries or concussion. And so you just train and try to prevent injuries like everybody else, but you just train like everybody else, a one size fits all. And so this is a hypothetical person that would be at risk for ACL tears and stress fractures. Now, the good thing about this is that when we give you this profile, you know, the athletic trainers we work with, the coaches we work with, the team physicians we work with know what to do with ACL risk. They have a FIFA 11 plus well-established training program to reduce your injury for ACL rupture. Probably stress fracture is even more preventable. Being a repetitive use injury, you can do lots of things to prevent stress fracture. Here's an example of an algorithm. It's our algorithm for bone mineral density. And so that's a strong risk factor for stress fractures. And this is not one or two SNPs like ACL rupture was. This is 22,000 DNA markers all combined together. Each DNA marker has a small effect, but the combined effect of these 22,000 DNA markers is really quite compelling. And I'll give you three measures for performance. The first is called correlation. Correlation is, if I just look at your DNA, how well can I predict your bone mineral density? That correlation is 50% for this DNA test. Now, 50% for DNA testing is very, very high. It's one of the highest there is for any kind of genetic test. It's better than heart disease. It's better than type 2 diabetes. So it's in the ballpark for being pretty effective. The next performance marker is called area under the curve, which is a measure for how well can I classify people without ever seeing them into those with low bone mineral density without. And the area under the curve for this test is 79%, which is also very, very high. The FDA and the AMA would start to think that that's clinically effective for treating diseases. So at AxGen, we have these tests now, and you can take a look at them. I'll just point out a couple of them. ACL ruptures are probably the worst injuries you get. It's common. It's very severe. It screws up the career of many, many, many different tests, and we can predict a pretty substantial increase. You're born with this increased risk for ACL tears. Another one I want to point out is stress fracture. because stress fracture is a common injury for endurance runners, repetitive use injury, so hence preventable. And we have a very strong test for stress fractures. And concussion is a serious injury that afflicts all the contact sports. And so it also has these long-term negative consequences. Now, not just injury risk, but we have nutrition and performance. And so I'll just talk about some of these. We do have strong tests for gluten sensitivity. So some people, if they eat gluten, they'll get intestinal inflammation, which will interfere with their performance. Some people are super sensitive to ibuprofen, and when you take ibuprofen after a hard workout, you could overdose. If you take too much ibuprofen, you could overdose and get kidney failure. We have heart rate and heart rate variability. That is a performance marker. For sure, your Whoop band is going to be more informative. That measures directly heart rate variability. But we could probably modify your information from the Whoop band and tell you whether you were born with high heart rate variability or low heart rate variability. And that'll help you interpret your Whoop band data a little bit better. Caffeine metabolism. Many athletes use caffeine as an ergogenic before performance. It improves your performance. It's clear that there's a sweet spot for caffeine, and that fast metabolizers should take more caffeine before their performance, and slow metabolizers should take less. It has a marked effect on how well the caffeine works for improving performance. We have a strong genetic test for testosterone, which is a very, very powerful performance marker, biomarker. And we have many tests for vitamins that will let you know whether you should be supplementing your diet with vitamin pills.